So, if you came across the trend where people talk about their failures as being portrayed as artworks in a museum of failures, you might have thought to yourself at one point that this is a very creative idea to do, actually, while still being incredibly vulnerable because you're sharing your biggest failures. And on the other side, it's also a bit questioning, right? Like you will be automatically questioned, why did this person fail, right? You will probably think something like, if I were in their shoes, that wouldn't have happened, because I know myself, I would have gone through. Now, that's something I thought from time to time when I came across these posts, and I will say that this was pretty ignorant, right? Because in my case, I did drop out of university for biotech, which is very ironic, by the way, because if you have seen some earlier posts from my side, I am building Tubterra, a platform that gets unconventional people into biotech. And so me saying I dropped out of biotech to pursue medicine for my North Star of working with stem cells is a bit ironic. And you're right to question that, like it doesn't make sense. The thing that I was thinking about when I came across these posts and also decided to make a video about it is that portraying certain failures as artworks in a museum is not only there to be a reminder of what you have suffered through, but also maybe a lens, because every artwork presents a lens into the current time it was painted in or created in. And so if I would look back 10 years ago to my decision to drop out of university, because for the reasons that I will explain, I feel like just also me documenting this digitally will allow me to dive into the lens of what I was thinking at that day or that moment, and why I decided to essentially leave the degree that I kind of wanted to do. So first things first, a passion does not equal something that you should be doing. For me, there is a difference between medicine and biotech, namely that medicine is just a bit more commitment to do, specifically for being a surgeon, right? Even physician scientists, you'll be sitting there 10 years plus, which again, if you think about it, you are compounding so many skills, these 10 years will have paid off in any way. So that wasn't really an issue for me, but I feel like that's an issue that is always there. For biotech, the feedback loop to certain things, research for instance, is very slow until you take agency. And in some places, unfortunately, hierarchy determines whether your agency comes through to some labs or not. And I was in a pretty bland environment, I will say that, even though it was a big city. I just didn't feel the vibe to be in that city. I didn't meet a lot of very inspiring people that, showed me what research could look like in 10 years. Like, I didn't see it. I didn't see the vision of doing this for a decade and then not doing what I want. Besides, your skills don't really compound as fast as in medicine, simply because these medical students, wherever they go, just because of their credentials, they will have an easier game to get into certain research places. That is unfortunately still the case. Biotech, biology is still a game of credentials. Because a lot of things cannot be self-taught, that's why. With software and tech, for instance, you can teach yourself essentially everything. You don't need to go for university because of IT. A lot of great courses are out there, like Stanford, the machine learning specialization, IBM has a lot. Like, these things exist and you can take agency to learn. For biology, you need lab access, first and foremost. A lot of these things, they cannot be, how do I say that? Like, they cannot be tested directly. With tech, you can do technical interviews and figure out whether someone can do or cannot do a thing. With biology, even with degrees, you cannot really estimate whether someone is capable to do a certain thing. And the job market specifically for like biotech people who spend too much time in universities without working in pharma, for instance, their jobs are essentially, or like their chances of getting a job, even if they come from a very prestigious universities, is like, I don't know, like I've seen it, it's not that high. And I didn't want to put myself out there in a degree that doesn't let me compound my skills, where at the very end I'm looking at a job market as well that is just not working in the field that I want to, and in places where funding is being cut. So those were my selfish reasons to say that I'm not willing to do this, because I cannot run experiments on that and see whether my thesis on being a biotech PhD is actually accurate. And because I wasn't able to do that, I decided I'm not going to do that. Now for medicine, I also cannot run the experiments, but I have seen people that made the physician scientist pathway possible. So I have living examples of what these people can do, and they're also working in fields they are genuinely interested about, also very close to where they did their residency in terms of the topic. And so for me personally, at that point, I was like, well, why not give this a try? Because lengthwise, it's the same, 10 years and a bit more. Compounding wise, you're just doing a bit more in terms of exposure as a medical student. You get to see the healthcare system, you see bottlenecks. As a PhD, I cannot see that. You get to see how technology at the current state is interacting with patients. Again, as a PhD, you can't see that from day-to-day basis. What you can also see is how doctors work, or any healthcare professionals at this point, and see where they have bottlenecks and develop solutions to that. Or specifically how, for instance, someone who's analyzing tissue has maybe certain issues in recognizing certain diseases because of a missing program that would help them, right? A lot of AIs, for instance, or like not large language models, but how do you call it? Also not pattern recognition models. They can, for instance, tell you that in a given tissue they can see some cancerous cells, which you, as someone who might be working in radiology, just simply cannot, because they are that small, right? Again, bottleneck, because even if you do the checkup as a radiology doctor for your patients and you're not able to see the cancer tissues, that will create a bottleneck for the years for you. And it is preventable, right? With the current models that we have, I think they have a higher accuracy rate than doctors, but I suppose that AI and doctors will have a higher accuracy rate as well, but I'm not quite sure about that, so feel free to look that up. So yeah, that was also a reason, the running experiment thing. And I think the last one was, I just don't like staying in one place forever. A PhD might not be strong enough to carry me around where I want to live. So I have some cities where I would like to live in. I'm not quite sure whether with this credential that I'll be getting, I can move that easily. Now, as a medical professional, that's also not easy, because depending on where you did your license to be a medical profession, it doesn't automatically translate that you can work in every country. That is a given. With a PhD, technically that is true, but again, as a PhD, you are very much dependent on countries investing into labs. So there's maybe a bit more freedom in being a medical professionalist. And those were essentially the reasons. So my Museum of Failures got a new art of failure, which is me dropping out. But I also hope that when I look back at this video in, let's say, 10 years, that I will be able to at least understand what I was thinking about. Like, I'm not here telling my future self that you should appreciate whatever I'm saying, because that is simply not true. But maybe it gives you a lens on what I was thinking as current day me. And yeah, like I have nothing really else to say at that point. Obviously, what I want to do again is not a very secure path. It does involve a few secure connections and credentials, but at the very end, nothing in life is really something that is handed out to you. There is nothing that happens for certain except death and taxes, but also depending on the country where you live in. But yeah, that's it for today's video. And I guess if you somewhat learned something from me, which I don't think in this video was possible, feel free to subscribe and comment down below.